There was a player who once held rank number 1 alone, just domination. They called him a god. And then one day, he disappeared. A year and a half later, a new game takes over the world. And the first thing he sees is, do you want to log in? Same player, new world. But skill doesn't reset. And this time, he's not just coming back. He's climbing the entire ranking from 0 like he never left. Deus Ex Machina Ragnarok, or Demrock for short. Immediately after its release, it took first place in the world rankings. A legendary game with over 100 million online players. But as time passed, its popularity inevitably declined, and now it's preparing to shut down its servers. Meanwhile, players gathered around a campfire and the system announced, "Hello, this is Deus Ex Machina Ragnarok. The service will be shut down in 30 minutes. Kaiser, number 1 on Demrock, looked at the fire and perpletost. Number 5 on Demrock, sat by the fire, hugging his knees, and said, "Damn game." Even though he always said so, but is it really true? And Swordmaster, ranked 4th on Demrock, folded his arms and said he agreed, except that it was a random dump and there was nothing funny about it, but he still couldn't believe it was closing. Then Cuckoo, ranked 3rd on Demrock, extended her hand and said, "If killing a dragon drops a brick, how did it even last this long?" Swordmaster frowned, looking at her, and asked, "Was it really necessary to ruin the atmosphere?" She asked, "Was she lying?" He said he thought she only had a stupid mask, but her manner of speech was no better, and she screamed indignantly, "What? Is he looking for a fight?" She clenched her fists and turned to him, and he folded his arms and said that all they know how to do is swear. Then Kaiser, the main character, rose to his feet and said, "And yet, it's a little sad." Perplotest added, "That's right, he'd studied this game more diligently than anyone else, so it's understandable. When he watched him fight, he thought it was a divine game." Then Cuckoo spread her arms and said, "And yet, God is fair. His soul is the worst of them all." Then Perplotest smiled and said, "To think, first place goes to a guy who doesn't even have a legendary skill. If he'd been even a little luckier, he wouldn't even sit at the same table with them." Cuckoo added, "After all his equipment broke 10 times in a row, he screamed, 'The world is against him.' They should have seen how hysterical he was then." Then Perplotest said, "If you look closely, this guy is the most annoying of them all." Then Swordmaster looked at the fire and said, "Yeah, out of everyone he knows, he really does have the worst luck." Then the system announced the service was shutting down again and thanked them for sticking with them until the very end. Then the players started disappearing, and Perplotest said, "Well done." Swordmaster said, "Well, that's it. This is the end." Cuckoo said they'll see each other in a decent game. Then they disappeared, and the protagonist continued to stare at the fire, but the next second he disappeared too. The Demrock service was shut down. 2 years had passed since then. The protagonist was riding on a bus, and schoolchildren were sitting next to him, looking at their phones and chatting. "Wow, what control! Amazing! He should see. He single-handedly took down a demon lord. Among rankers, Exterminator from the Executioner's Guild is definitely the best. The guild is cool, but he prefers the Empress. It's his way of acting alone, like a proud wolf. Perhaps there's no player now who can surpass him? Is there? And who? The one who was the strongest back in the Demrock days. The number 1 ranked player, Kaiser. That's right, there was also Kaiser, but he disappeared right after the servers shut down. No one has any idea what he's doing now. At that moment, he was sitting next to them, smiling and adjusting his cap. 2 years have passed since Demrock shut down. Now the most popular game is Demrock's sequel, God of Savior, or simply Gauze, a world with even more players, new races and professions, a universe of boundless freedom. The protagonist thought that this should be waiting for him, Gauze 2. After all, the top player had returned. His name was Kang Do-hyun, the former number 1 in the Demrock rankings. Kaiser, demobilized with the rank of sergeant. Sometime later, he ran into the apartment, abruptly opened the door and shouted, "Capsule! Where's the capsule?" His sister looked at him and was surprised. "Brother, is he back already?" And the mother, holding a saucepan, was indignant. He'd just gotten out of the army and was already looking for a capsule? When he was little, all he could do was call for his mother. The protagonist opened the door to his room, and his mother continued, "So what if you talk about children being useful when they grow up?" At that moment, the protagonist dropped his backpack, and looking at the capsule, thought with admiration, this is the very one he'd only seen on the news, a virtual reality capsule. He pressed himself against it and thought that after a year and a half of military service, he'd finally saved up for this. That touch, those curves. Then he climbed into the chair and, still smiling, said, "Even though it's secondhand, the upholstery is very soft." Then he pulled the helmet toward himself and added, "Well, time to go." After that, everything around him lit up and the system announced, "Iris scanning. ID card verification. ID card confirmed. Synchronization complete. Welcome to Adventurer's Paradise." He must please create a character. At that moment, the protagonist, illuminated by the sun's rays, looked into the mirror standing to the side and thought, is this his character? Does he look too much like a soldier? He scratched the back of his head, then glanced at the multitude of hairstyles offered and thought, there are so many, he's too lazy to sort through, he'll just pick one at random. Then the system asked him to enter a nickname, and he thoughtfully said, "Nickname, huh?" Then he grinned and said, "Kaiser." After that, the system reported, "Character created. They are glad to meet you, Kaiser." Moving to the training area, MC found himself near a castle engulfed in flames, and a system window appeared, stating that this place is the battlefield of the terrifying Battle of Arlen Castle. The protagonist thought, wow, this is what a fully immersive game is. Then the system offered him a weapon to choose from, and he thought, weapons? Huh. He looked at the options and thought they weren't offering anything special. He'd take what he was used to. Then he pulled a sword from the system window and, smiling, thought that he'd only used swords since Demrock. Then he heard a shout, "Hey!" He looked away, and at that moment, Charlie, the knight captain, ran up to him. He looked at him and shouted, "What is he doing here?" He grabbed his arm and shouted, "Come on, follow him." He ran forward and shouted, "The other mercenaries have already joined the fight." The protagonist ran after him and shouted, "Oh, yeah." And then the system announced that he had joined a group with the knight captain, Charlie. They ran into the castle and then stopped in a corridor full of bodies. Charlie, gritting his teeth, looked around and said that they had finally teamed up with those creatures. If the rumors were true, they had made a contract with that very monster. Then he turned slightly and shouted that if they didn't hurry and stop them, he would come into this world. He opened the door slightly and, looking at the protagonist, shouted at him to hurry. They would get there faster through this entrance. Then they went inside, but arrows stuck into the ground next to them. Charlie looked ahead, and several monsters armed with sharp clubs were looking at them. The knight captain said they had already reached here. First, he would break through them. But then, he looked in surprise as the protagonist resolutely ran into battle, while one of the monsters ran at him and swung its weapon. The protagonist's eyes lit up with excitement, and Charlie shouted, "Be careful." Then, the protagonist easily dodged the monster's attack. The creature looked at him indignantly, and then MC abruptly drew his weapon and attacked the monster in one lunge. Then he accelerated and ran to the next bridge and impaled it with his shoulder. The remaining two looked at him in bewilderment, while another swung his weapon and struck in front of him. But the protagonist abruptly turned to the side and then attacked the monster with a knee to the chin, knocking it back. The remaining two began loading their crossbows, but the protagonist abruptly rushed through them and, swinging his weapon, struck both. Then he stopped and, looking at the sword in his hand, thought that he was worried about not playing for so long, but it wasn't so bad. On the contrary, his body felt even lighter than before. He began hopping from foot to foot, and then Charlie approached him and said, "My God, incredible to deal with 5 monsters single-handedly." Then the system reported that the Knight Captain Charlie admired his skill. Knight Captain Charlie's affection is increasing. He wondered, affection? Something similar had happened in Demrock, but for it to increase in just one battle, the criteria here are more lenient. Then Charlie smiled and thought, this nameless mercenary possesses such incredible power. Perhaps he is the very hero spoken of in legends. At that moment, a system window appeared, stating that Knight Captain Charlie was deeply impressed by his battle. Knight Captain Charlie's affection is increasing significantly. Knight Captain Charlie's affection has reached its maximum. He now trusts him completely. Even if he commits a crime, he will believe him if he says he was framed. Did he receive the maximum affection title from the start? Maximum affection from the start. Rank, rare. Description: a title granted to those who manage to develop NPC affection to the maximum during the tutorial. Effect: NPC affection grows faster. All stats +2. The protagonist looked at this and, smiling, thought that he was quite useful. Then Charlie smiled and said that thanks to him, everything went much easier. Then he pointed his finger at the door and added, "Now, if they eliminate that warlock inside, this war will end in their victory." The next second, flashes of energy began to spread throughout the room and destroy stone columns. Charlie, noticing this, shouted, "Oh my God, has the summoning already begun?" The next second, bat-like monsters began to crawl out of the walls. Charlie turned and shouted that he would take them on, and he must quickly go and stop the summoner. His body began to glow with a golden light. He reached for his sword and said that he was relying on it. Then he turned his gaze to him and added that he requested that the hero be accompanied by the blessing of Arlen Castle. Then he shouted loudly and charged. Looking at him, MC thought, should he enter? But in the video tutorials, Charlie always entered first. They said the plot changed depending on the player's actions. But was it really that extreme? Then he approached the door, and the system announced that only one person could enter at a time. If the player died, the seal would be broken, and all negative effects would be removed from the boss. Did he wish to enter? He thought there was a system message in the tutorial. This was a hidden element. A hidden element is a deliberately hidden mechanic in the game that is activated under certain conditions or situations, which can lead to a special reward. The system asked, did he really want to enter? He thought no reason to miss out on such a rarity. He said, yes. Then he opened the doors, and the alchemist, hiding behind a dark robe, shouted, "What's going on?" He summoned him. He must obey. But at that moment, a huge monster stood behind him, its sharp teeth covered in blood. The system reported, captured iron-blooded demon dragon. Title, legendary. Named, danger unknown. Type dragon. Stats, sealed. Description, abyssal demon dragon bearing the name of Iron Blood. Currently, all of its abilities are sealed with shackles, and its movement is limited. The protagonist looked at it in surprise and thought, legendary? Gauze borrowed a lot from Demrock. Common, rare, heroic, legendary. One of the interactions is the rank system. Ranks apply to bosses as well, but the most special among them are the named, unique monsters. A captive iron-blooded demon dragon stood before the protagonist. He thought that this was the named boss. The monster began to inhale air and then let out a loud roar, and waves of sound scattered around. The system reported hearing the roar of a captive iron-blooded demon dragon. The roar of the overwhelming creature lowers his physical stats. Movement speed reduced by 20%. Attack speed reduced by 20%. Defense reduced by 30%. Magic resistance reduced by 25%. The protagonist shielded himself with his hand and frowning thought, "They're kidding me." He had absolutely no conscience. Although, since all his abilities were sealed, maybe he could break through, but if he touched it with his paw, he would die instantly. But the situation, this had happened in Demrock too, and each time he had only one option. He then concentrated his energy in his body and began to draw his sword from its sheath. He considered whether it was doom or gloom, all or nothing. Then he abruptly leaped to the side, dodging the dragon's attack. He ran forward and attacked the paw of the monster in front of him. The creature screamed loudly, and then the protagonist turned around and struck again with his sword, then slid back along the ground. He frowned, looking closely at the monster's health bar, and thought, 120. A total of 120 damage for 2 attacks. The community hadn't lied. The difficulty was simply prohibitive. People in the comments were asking if it was possible to kill the boss in the tutorial. Was he crazy? It was impossible. He wasn't added for players to kill. The protagonist dealt another blow to the monster's paw. People in the comments also wrote, "Iron-winged demon dragon," or whatever it's called. It gives me goosebumps. It was truly creepy. The protagonist continued the fight. And in the comments, they also added, "Can't you kill the boss in the tutorial? Damage does go through him." No, you can't. Even the exterminator couldn't do it. MC then launched another attack, leaving a jagged wound on the monster's body. Users wrote that it seemed like the damage was just for realism. Wow, he actually thought to hit him. He just stood there and watched until he died. Then the monster struck with its paw, and the protagonist swung his weapon again, blocking it. Users were surprised. What's going on? Did his name change? Idleness Demon Dragon? Seriously, it changed? Can names change? Some kind of bug? There are no bugs in GAs. The player controls an AI that is 10 times more powerful than anyone else. So what's this? Did someone kill him? Come on, really? How can a first-level character kill him? Even Exterminator couldn't handle it. And now someone did? Who is he? At that moment, MC plunged his weapon into the monster's body, and it screamed loudly, falling to the ground. The system reported that he had defeated the captive iron-winged demon dragon. He was the first person ever to kill a legendary named boss in the tutorial. He single-handedly defeated a legendary named new boss. The achievement is entered into the adventure book. He receives it as a reward. At that moment, the protagonist, struggling to breathe, clutched the hilt of his sword and thought, "What a resilient creature." After that, he pulled the sword from the monster's body and thought, by the way, since he was the first, that means even those monsters couldn't defeat him. At that moment, he remembered Kukuda Kuku pointing her finger forward and shouting, "Hey, they're idiots. What were they even thinking when they created this?" And Purpletust folded his arms over his chest and, laughing, said, "What a dump, damn them." In the present, the protagonist smiled and thought, "I wonder how they are doing." Then the system reported that he had received the title of First Assassin. Stats corresponding to his playstyle and achievement awaken. The Weapon Master stat has been awakened. The Hidden Dragon stat has been awakened. The Assassin stat has been awakened. The Hero stat has been awakened. The Overcoming stat has been awakened. Conditions fulfilled. The Unique stat, the Eye of Truth, has been awakened. MC looked at the system windows that appeared in surprise and thought, what the heck? Why are there so many? Usually, you can only get one stat in the tutorial. Stats are one of the special systems in GOs. They come in a wide variety, from search and guide stats to combat-oriented stats like Swordmaster. Depending on the player's achievement, stats are assigned to higher ranks. The protagonist looked thoughtfully at the system window and thought, wow, an increase in all stats, the Swordmaster effect for any weapon, location detection, status immunity, and even a unique stat. Weapon Master, Hero, Assassin, these are all great skills, but they're not unique. While no one has them all, they're quite common individually. And what about the Eye of Truth? Unique ranked, literally a one-of-a-kind stat. It's a jackpot. 1 unique and 5 common stats. The system window in front of him said, First Killer, rank Legendary, description. A title granted to the first person to defeat a legendary named boss. Effect, Fury, deals 10% additional damage. Predator, defeating a boss on the first try increases all stats by +6. The Predator effect does not apply to bosses of the same type that have been defeated previously. All stats are increased by +10. The current bonus from the Predator effect is +6. He thought. And then there's this incredible title. It's beautiful, simply a fairy tale. Even a loser like him got such a chance. At that moment, he looked to the side, seeing the doors begin to open. Charlie looked back and, making a few sounds, walked forward. He walked into the room, extended his hand forward, and said that he definitely heard the roar of the monster. Did he kill it? MC replied something unintelligible, and Charlie was surprised, and there wasn't a single scratch on him. Who was he? The protagonist tried to respond again, but Charlie raised his hand and shouted, No, it doesn't matter who he is or where he came from. True heroes always appear in times of trouble. He placed his hand on his chest and added, His appearance in this chaotic world will be a ray of light that will bring great change, and he, Charlie, has no doubt of it. Then he knelt down and added, O hero, he asks that this humble knight become his faithful blade. The system then announced, Charlie, captain of the Knights of Arlen Castle, wishes to swear allegiance to him. If he accepts, Charlie will cease being captain of the knights and become a subordinate of the Kaiser. All privileges due to him will pass to his master. Seeing this, MC frowned and thought, what? The system informed him, however, that he was long dead, so he would not be able to receive its privileges, even if he became its master. He thought that the training recreated a past event, so it was simply a formality. Then he nodded and said, so be it. The system informed him that he had accepted Charlie's oath. In the memory of the knight captain, Charlie, he would forever remain his master. The war that went down in history as the tragedy of Arlen Castle would, in Charlie's memory, end with a worthy ending. He would find peace, looking forward to the future with him. He thought he would find peace then. The system informed him that in a moment he would be transported to Pantheon. Energy began to spread around, and then the protagonist turned, noticing a portal forming. Then Charlie called to him and asked where they would go now. He looked away and thought about where now. He smiled and said, to where they are needed. The world is in turmoil now. Charlie said, go where they're needed. The system said, teleport activated. Teleport to Pantheon in 5 seconds. 5, 4. Charlie then held out the pendant and said, sir, he asks that he accept this. The system said, 3, 2. The protagonist took it in his hand and asked, what is it? The system said, he received it. After that, Charlie lit up and smiling said that he thanked him, sir. The system said, teleport to Pantheon. Welcome to Pantheon. Here he will choose a god and determine his future path. May the grace of God be with him. The protagonist looked around and thought, so this is Pantheon. Instead of the noble name Pantheon, this place is more often called a card lottery, a place in Gauze that has made countless players laugh and cry. Here the summoning of the gods unfolds. One can serve only one god, and the choice of deity determines one's class. In Gauze, everything is divided into ranks, and the gods also have their own hierarchy. There are the gods of lore, the hero gods, and the gods of myth. The gods of lore are those who brought divinity to existence through stories passed down orally. The hero gods are people who were once called heroes and who ascended to the pantheon, becoming gods. And finally, the gods of myth are those who created entire mythologies. These include Zeus from Greco-Roman myths or Odin from Norse mythology. Naturally, the further down the list, the higher the rank. Then the system announced that each card contained the power of different gods. He must choose the god he wishes to serve. The protagonist looked at the system windows that appeared and thought about how many there were. He was unlucky anyway, so he shouldn't be greedy. Then he was surprised, looked to the side, and noticed a glow. He wondered why that card was gold. Then the system announced that the Eye of Truth had been activated. He thought, see through the hidden. This was simply an incredible ability. If it was true, then from now on, he would be able to choose the right card in any lottery. He remembered how Cuckoo had shouted. Why was he so unlucky? She felt so sorry for him. And Swordmaster had said he had everything but luck. MC thought he had always just joked around, but how bitter it was in his heart. However, now, with this power, he could once again climb to the top of the ranks. He sighed happily, and placing his hand on his chest, thought calmly, of course he would choose the gold card. Then he took it in his hand, and the system announced that he had drawn the god of myths, the one-armed sword god Tyr. Did he wish to choose this god? He smiled and thought, the god of myths? With that, the next second, system windows appeared, saying, the apostle vessel is not formed. He cannot become the apostle of Tyr. Please, he has to choose the card again. He was surprised. What does this mean? He can't become an apostle. And the system reported, Tyr is extremely puzzled by the unexpected situation. He thought the vessel was not formed. He had never even heard of such an outcome. Wait, a vessel? Normal players lose to a dragon demon, after which a goddess appears and grants them a revelation. But he killed it, and the goddess never appeared. Does this mean that the whole problem is that he did not receive the goddess's revelation? Then a system window appeared in front of him, which said Player, Kaiser, Level 1, Class, Adventurer, Titles, 2, Maximum Affection from the very beginning, the first killer. He thought, no, there's nothing in the class column where Apostle should be. To hell with it. What should he do now? In that case, the card is useless. They'll tell him there's no vessel anyway. He knelt down and thought, how long had he waited for this moment? What should he do? He put his hand to his head and thought, if he deletes the character and creates a new one, he'll have to wait a whole 60 days. Then he looked ahead in surprise and noticing a bright card, thought, red? He reached out to it and thought, what, he's never heard of a red-ranked card. And the system announced he'd chosen a hidden card. He chose Cassiar, the forgotten last adventurer. The adventurer's vessel is ready. He became the Apostle of Cassiar. He thought, right, this is hidden content. The system reported that he had changed his class to Last Adventurer and had gained class skills. Class, Last Adventurer. Description. Humanity was originally adventurers. They were the masters of Avtartel, the strongest of all, possessing power capable of threatening even the gods. Until, overnight, everything collapsed. Overnight, humanity fell, and he was the last adventurer. At that moment, energy gathered in his body, and a system window appeared, stating a unique ability. An adventurer is one who strives for freedom. As masters and friends of Avtartel, they possess explosive potential. The effect allows the use of skills without class limitations. He thought, wow, without class limitations, he could use any skills. With this, he would be able to choose only the most useful skills and create the perfect requirements. In any case, thanks to the Eye of Truth, he is guaranteed to be able to obtain the necessary skills. And if you add the stat of Weapon Master to this, he would be an absolute player without any weaknesses. The system reported that the class change was complete, teleporting to Avtartel in a few seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The protagonist thought it was worth trying to climb back to the top. A few seconds later, he teleported to Avtartel. The city had begun. Players were chatting around and the summoning was a complete mess. Oh well, he shouldn't be upset. Gauze had plenty to do. And besides, combat classes. And then the scouts came forward. Officially, they recruit new members to the guilds. But in reality, the players treat them like annoying street barkers. One of them put his hand to his head and said that they needed to find at least someone this month. The boss would be nagging him again. His comrade looked away and told him to look at that guy. He replied, "He's just a walking disaster." He seemed completely lost. They should get out of here. These kinds of things are useless. At that moment, a system window appeared in front of the protagonist, saying, "Necklace of Blood and Oaths. A necklace sealed with the blood of the Arlen Castle Knight Captain Charlie belongs only to its master and cannot be transferred. Rank: Heroic, no level limit, relationship limit, Master Charlie, special properties, defense and magic resistance increase with experience, unlocks at level 35. MC thought, wow, a heroic rank item, and its properties are simply unreal. How sweet. Too sweet. Then a notification appeared before him. A goblin cleanup quest. He thought, goblin cleanup? The system window said goblin cleanup. Rank normal. Description: quest from an experienced Arlen hunter named Dante. Kill goblins with 0 out of 40. Reward: 80 silver and experience. Risk of failure: Dante's favor may decrease. Time limit: 24 hours. Players around looked at the system windows that appeared and said, hunting quest. Wow, lucky. At that moment, Hunter Dante climbed up onto the hill and, spreading his arms, shouted that in that case he was counting on them. They had to exterminate all these stupid goblins. Then the players started shouting. One of the guys shouted that he was looking for people in a party. The guy behind him shouted, who's going with him on the skinning quest? The guy added that he was looking for a tank, damage dealer, a healer, leveling to level 12, non-stop. The protagonist looked at them and thought, looks like everyone's going to form groups. At that moment, Shieldbest approached him and told him to listen. They were going to level up to level 12. Wouldn't you like to join them? Then Forehead here approached them and added, they'll get a group bonus too. They need to be together. Yubinkung smiled and offered to go with them. The protagonist thought, a party then. Actually, they were right. Hunting is much easier in a group, and given the bonus experience, teamwork is essential. With that, he said, okay, he's in. The system reported that Shieldbest's group had been formed. All players were level 1. Then Shieldbest looked at the protagonist and asked, so he's a Kaiser fan? Yubinkung was surprised. Kaiser? Who the hell is that? Forehead here said he was one. Ranked number 1 during Demrock. She said he seemed like a die-hard Kaiser fan. Forehead here added, he even named his character after him. Then MC awkwardly scratched his cheek. Then Shieldbest raised his hand and shouted, so are they moving? Forehead here suggested they quickly level up to 12. Yubinkung raised her scepter and shouted, forward. The protagonist supported them. After a while, the system reported that Shieldbest had cast a control effect on the Green Goblin. At that moment, he attacked the monsters with his shield, and the system reported that the Green Goblin was stunned for 1 second. He turned around and shouted, stunned! Everyone attack! Forehead, here, fired an arrow and shouted for him to take it in the forehead. Yubinkung aimed a magic arrow at the monsters. The system reported that the Green Goblin had been defeated. The remaining 2 goblins screamed loudly and then charged. They attacked Shieldbest, but he held up a shield. Forehead here and Yubinkung called out to him in alarm, and he turned and shouted for them to kill him quickly. Then Forehead here shouted for him to wait. Yubinkung said she was still on cooldown, but at that moment, the protagonist kicked off the ground and, suddenly charging, defeated one of the goblins. The system reported that the Green Goblin had been defeated. The others watched in amazement, and then the protagonist leaped into action again and defeated another Green Goblin, and then another. Forehead here clenched his fist and shouted, Kaiser! Yubinkung added, he's the best. Then the protagonist sheathed his sword, and Shieldbest approached him with a smile, saying, excellent work, and he's good. At this rate, they'll be easy. Before he could finish, he added fearfully, Kaiser, behind you! The protagonists turned around, and behind them stood a multitude of green goblins. Shieldbest turned and shouted that they couldn't handle this, that they needed to run. But at that moment, the protagonist charged, and he called out to him in fear. He kicked off the ground, leaping into attack, and struck several monsters at once. Not long before, Purpletast had asked why he always picked fights when the odds were against him. Was he a bully? One kuku was enough. Then MC looked at him and asked, against his favor? What do you mean? He replied, well, he was low on health, and then suddenly something like a boss appeared, and he immediately rushed him. Isn't that reckless? He replied, but he had finished him off. Purpletast looked at him in surprise and said, well, that's true, but it's dangerous. In the present tense, he thought, he says, reckless? He's just defending himself. He doesn't need to fight. He's exposing himself to unnecessary risk. At that moment, the protagonist charged and thought, but he never fights recklessly. He's just confident of his victory. The next second, he used a critical hit. He started hitting the monsters, and the system reported a critical hit. He killed a green goblin. Kaiser gets green goblin skin when the loot is distributed. He thought, there's only one poison goblin left. He was running away from a crowd of goblins, and then he turned sharply and charged at the archers. He thought that in a fight against a crowd, it's better to eliminate the archers first. He rushed forward, cutting down several monsters in his path, and then the system reported, overcoming, rank, unique, effect, overcomes limits with an indomitable spirit, overcoming characteristic activated. Then the protagonist deflected an archer's projectile and it looked at it in surprise. MC rushed forward and left a slashing attack on the monster's body. At that moment, another creature ran up to him, but the protagonist blocked its attack with his weapon. He then delivered a powerful blow, and the system reported that, thanks to the Weapon Master characteristic effect, the use restriction had been lifted. Thanks to the Adventurer effect, he had access to the basic dagger skill, Vulnerable Strike. He thought, wow. He twirled the sword in his hand and then plunged the weapon into the monster's head. The system reported that he had used the Vulnerable Strike skill. He deflected the Vulnerable Strike, inflicting critical damage. At that moment, another goblin attacked him from the side, but the protagonist countered, throwing his club aside. The system reported that, thanks to the Weapon Master stat effect, the usage restriction had been lifted. Thanks to the Adventurer stat effect, he had access to the basic blunt weapon skill, Swing. MC charged again and stabbed one of the monsters in the chin. He left it there, then grabbed the club and struck, applying force. The system reported that he had used the Swing skill, and his blunt weapon mastery had increased. His blunt weapon mastery had reached level 2. His dagger mastery had increased. His dagger mastery had reached level 2. His sword mastery had increased. His sword mastery had reached level 3. The protagonist looked at the monster's body and thought, that's pretty cool. He thought he could just learn skills without restrictions, but to be able to use them right away, that's way more than he expected. At that moment, Shieldbest looked at him, perplexed. He thought, how is this even possible? Even an experienced group would have had a hard time. Everyone wants to defeat such a bunch of goblins, and he dealt with them alone? He thought, Kaiser, is he really the same Kaiser from the Demrock days? What nonsense. That genius ranker disappeared without a trace 2 years ago, and he ended up in his group? It just can't be. Then who is he? Then he was surprised, noticing the protagonist's happy face and thought, has he completely lost his mind? After that, MC looked at the blue flame and thought, it seems that weapons that don't drop as loot just disappear. Well, he removed the weapon restrictions and even tested the skills, so he's quite happy with the result. Status window. He looked at his stats and thought, 3 levels in 1 hunt. Although he is not tied to a specific weapon, his core is the sword. Strength 9, dexterity 8, the rest he will put into perception. The rest he will cover for now with the title and Charlie necklace. Then he folded his arms across his chest, and at that moment, Forehead here shouted, wow, Kaiser, he's simply incredible. He was in complete awe. Yubinkun gave him a thumbs up and shouted, Kaiser, he's the best. Then Shieldbest asked, they should listen. Is he by any chance that same Kaiser? Forehead here said, come on. That guy retired a long time ago. Why would he suddenly come back? He said, but when you see how he fights, other thoughts just don't come to mind. He said, that's for sure. He really does look like Kaiser. They continued to cheer. It was simply amazing. Even if he said that he was the real Kaiser, they would believe him. At that moment, the protagonist smiled awkwardly and scratched the back of his head, thinking that he was Kaiser. Then Forehead here said, by the way, Mr. Kaiser, did he pull out a mythical god? His damage is just insane. And he laughed slightly and said that it was all because of the stats. Well, and a bit lucky with the title. Shieldbest shouted in surprise, wow, he even has a title? Forehead here said, he'll soon become a ranker. Yubinkung added, then they should definitely be friends. Then Shieldbest said, well, they've regained their strength. Maybe they should continue hunting? And Forehead here clenched his fist and shouted, then this time they can take down 10 of them at once? MC smiled and said, right, great idea. And he shouted, hey, Shieldbest, they have to go. Kaiser himself is with them. Yubinkung added, go ahead. At that moment, the protagonist remembered how Purplitast had said not long before, they need to go quickly. And still, they need to get ready. Kuku put her hands on her waist and said, Kaiser will do everything for them anyway. He's a ranker. The swordmaster said, well, actually, they're rankers too. They screamed, what kind of ranker is he? What? How dare she? So, what will he do to her? In the present, the protagonist thought, I wonder how the others are doing. The next second, a system window appeared saying, emergency quest, mutant goblin blood, rank, rare, description. A quest from the alchemist Kalde, who has been around for a very long time. He's recently become interested in mutant goblins and seems to have found a clue. He must obtain fresh blood from a mutant goblin warrior living in a cave in Arty Forest. Kill a mutant goblin warrior 0 out of 1 and obtain the blood of a mutant goblin warrior 0 out of 1. Rewards, 1 gold, experience, and a silver ring crafted by Kaldi. Risk of failure, sympathy. Kaldi may decrease. Time limit, none. The protagonist thought, a mutant goblin? After a while, they approached the cave, And Forehead here put his hand to his chest and said he was nervous. Yubin-kun frowned and said she was too. MC looked at them and thought, of course. While they were walking here, thanks to some extra hunting, the entire group had managed to level up. But this dungeon is called a beginner's grinder. In the comments, people were wondering how to take down the mutant goblins. Is it even possible to kill them? If you follow the tactics, it's possible. Yeah, but they all seem to do that. But it's incredibly difficult. One mistake and everyone dies. Is that even normal? The protagonist thought the first run was a guaranteed death. A raid demo, the Tomb of Arde. Of all the names for this one, not a single one gave them any hope. Compared to regular goblins, it's incredibly difficult and has special mechanics that require teamwork. The combination of these two factors made this place a grinder for newbies. Then they went inside, and some players passed by the protagonist's party. One of them shouted, "Damn it, are they kidding me? Is this even possible to complete?" His friend added, "They should at least make it possible for solo playthroughs, because every mistake a teammate makes you want to punch someone." Yubin-kun looked at them and said, "It looks like it's going to be really hard." Shieldbest said, "Difficult or not, they should be able to handle it. If they don't complete this, they'll have no business in future raids." The protagonist thought that was a good observation. Even experienced employees are more likely to be hired than newbies. It's the same in games. Also, users wrote in the comments, "Is it absolutely necessary to kill the Goblin Warrior? Without him, neither the guild nor the party will accept him properly. Can't you just say you killed him?" Players wrote, "Doesn't he know that everything is written down in the adventure book? He's an infuriating idiot. He should just delete the game. He has the IQ of a goblin, seriously." The protagonist thought such tricks wouldn't work in GOs. The adventure book, quests, materials, discovering new regions, and defeating bosses. Everything the player does in GOs is recorded in the adventure book. Maybe later, when they've accumulated dozens of bonuses, this won't be so important, but now, to get into a group to fight the bosses in the next city, you'll naturally have to beat them all. Especially since the boss of the next city, unlike the boss in Artie, is mandatory. The next second, they approached the huge doors. A system window appeared in front of them, stating, "Lair of the Mutant Goblin Warriors. Rank, Rare. Type, Group Dungeon. Feature, Solo Boss. Description, the dwelling place of a once great and valiant goblin warrior who, under the influence of a curse, abandoned his tribe. Participant limit, 4 people. Level restriction, up to level 10. Then the protagonist smiled and asked, "Well, is it time to go in?" Shieldbest nodded and said, "Yes, they are ready." Yubin-kun shouted that she had reread the tactics more than 10 times. She would try not to screw up. After this, Shieldbest approached the door and, putting his hand to it, said that in that case they were going in. The system reported that the leader of the Shieldbest group was about to enter the lair of the mutant goblin warrior. "Do they agree?" Forehead here shouted, "Forward." The protagonist said that they should go. The system reported, confirming the number of participants and checking the participants' levels. Entry into the mutant goblin warrior's lair is authorized. The doors then began to open. The protagonist smiled and, flexing his fists, said he hadn't stretched in a while. After that, they went inside. Torches began to glow on the cave walls, and a dark figure with a frightening aura appeared in front. The system reported, Mutant Goblin Warrior, HP 20,000 out of 20,000, Title, Elite Boss, Type, Goblin, Stats, Warrior, Mutant, Body Strengthening. Description, he was the greatest warrior in the tribe, but due to a curse, his skin changed color. He lost his mind and was exiled. Then the monster slung his weapon over his shoulder and screamed loudly, and Shieldbest cried out in fear. "So that's what he's like, an elite boss?" Yubin-kun asked. "Is this really just a game?" The protagonist frowned and shouted, "Coming." The monster leaped straight at them, and Shieldbest stepped forward, gritting his teeth and thinking that no matter how tough Kaiser was, he couldn't cover the 3 of them forever. At least he had to give it his all. The monster began to approach them and he shouted, "Everyone scatter." Everyone jumped in different directions, and Shieldbest, still holding his shield in front of him, thought, "First phase, dash!" He sharply dodged to the side, avoiding the monster's attack. This caused the mutant goblin warrior to crash into the wall, and the system reported that the mutant goblin warrior was stunned for 2 seconds. Shieldbest shouted, "Now!" Forehead here fired an arrow, and Yubin-kun added a magical strike. The attacks hit the monster precisely, and then Shieldbest and the boss's gazes locked. The monster then swung its enormous sword and struck, but Shieldbest concentrated its energy and blocked with its shield. The system reported, defense stat activated. If allies are behind him, his defense, health, and stamina increase. He shouted, "Aggro." MC then flew forward and dealt a few blows to the monster. Afterward, a magic projectile flew at the boss, and Shieldbest, smiling, thought, "Okay, everything's going according to plan. If this continues, they'll easily pass the first phase." Then Forehead here shouted, "Shieldbest, phase change soon." He wondered what he was talking about. The phase change occurs when health drops to 10,000. Then he looked at his health bar and thought in surprise, "Huh?" The next second, the protagonist suddenly lunged forward and attacked the monster's arm, beating its attack. The monster screamed loudly, and Shieldbest watched in surprise. At that moment, the protagonist smiled and said, "The phase is over." After a while, the interviewer sat on a bench with the protagonist and said that Kaiser's group, which cleared an impenetrable dungeon and defeated the boss, is called the strongest. Could he share the secret of their success? He asked. A secret? It's just that everyone is good at what they do, she said. Usually, yes. The standard group composition is a tank, damage dealer, healer, and support. As far as she knew, there should be 4 of them, but Kaiser's party doesn't have a tank, so how do they even manage to raid? The MC folded his arms and said, "A tank, so that's an important role. He has to fight the boss one-on-one, identify all of its phases and patterns, and absorb damage. He's irreplaceable, so he plays that role." She cried out in surprise. "What?" And he smiled, looking at her. Not long before, Shieldbest looked at the wounded boss and thought, how is this possible? Even tanks have a hard time interrupting patterns with their crowd control skills, and he interrupts them like that, without using any crowd control effects? And a damage dealer does this. Then the monster swung his huge weapon, and the protagonist dodged to the side and thought, big deal, such a pattern. Then he delivered several slashing attacks and Forehead here shouted, "Wow, they should see. He hits the pressure points right away." Yu Bingkung shouted, "Wow." He added, "Damn," he interrupted the pattern again. At that moment, Shieldbest looked at the boss's health in surprise and noticed that his health had dropped to 20%. The second phase will begin now. Then he turned around and shouted, "Everyone prepare for the next phase." Forehead here shouted, "Acknowledged." After that, the system reported that the mutant goblin warrior's health had dropped below 20%. The mutant goblin warrior is activating a characteristic. The warrior characteristic has been activated. The monster stood up, and energy exploded in all directions. The system reported that all of the mutant goblin warrior's stats had been increased, and he was entering a frenzy. The mutant stat had been activated. The protagonist thought, well, it's happening. The mutant stat, unlike regular stats, grants each boss unique abilities. Among these, the stat received by the mutant goblin warrior was a rule, a popular counting rhyme. The system reported that dealing physical damage 4 or more times in a row would debuff the entire party. Dealing magical damage 3 or more times in a row would return all damage to the attackers. The monster then screamed loudly, and the system added that due to the warrior stat's frenzy effect, players' attack and movement speeds would be reduced by 4%. Forehead here shouted, "He's hard enough to fight, and now they've applied a debuff?" Then the system reported that the hero stat blocks mental pollution. The frenzy effect is ignored, immune to mutation effects. The protagonist smiled and thought, wow, so those debuffs don't work on him? Then Shieldbest turned around and shouted, "Okay, everyone, they shouldn't panic and attack randomly. They need to focus only on dodging." Forehead here shouted that he understood. Shieldbest added, "Kaiser, he's also debuffed, right?" But he told them to just wait here. He shouted in surprise, "What?" And the protagonist said he'd deal with him quickly. He then charged. The boss swung his weapon, but the protagonist held his sword in front of him, blocking his attack, and then jumped even higher and dealt several attacks to the monster's body. Forehead here shouted in surprise, "Why aren't crowd control effects working on him?" Yu Bingkung placed her hand on her chest and said, "They're all under debuffs now, but him." Shieldbest frowned and wondered what was going on. Wasn't he the apostle of a forgotten god? And besides, he looks like a true god of war right now. At that moment, the protagonist struck the monster again and again, and Shieldbest thought, Kaiser. After that, MC abruptly turned around and delivered several more powerful attacks. The system reported, level up. Sword mastery increased. Sword mastery reached level 7. With level 7 sword mastery, sword damage is increased by 7%. The protagonist then charged again and, appearing behind the monster, delivered a powerful blow. The system reported that the fury effect dealt 10% additional damage to the boss. The protagonist concentrated and then delivered a powerful blow in front of him, slicing the monster in half. After that, the system reported the goblin mutant warrior was defeated. The dungeon is cleared. Forehead here shouted, "Wow." Yu Bingkung shouted, "Wow." Then Shieldbest said to listen to Kaiser. Forehead here shouted, "Leader, what's wrong with him?" He said, "Could he be the real Kaiser?" He looked surprised. "What?" And then they all looked at the protagonist, who was standing on the body of the defeated boss. The system reported that the time calculation for the run is complete. The runtime is 29 minutes, 58 seconds. The current record rankings are as follows. First place, Shieldbest. 29 minutes 58 seconds. Speedrun ranking, they took first place. They are entitled to the following rewards and special rewards according to their level of merit. First place, Kaiser. Second place, Shieldbest. Third place, Forehead here. Fourth place, Yu Bingkung. Rewards are given to first place based on merit. He received the red leather armor of the Goblin Mutant Warrior. He received the red shoulder pads of the Goblin Mutant Warrior. He received the red greatsword of the Goblin Mutant Warrior. He received the title Prince of the Red Run. Throne of the Red Run. Rank, heroic, description. A title granted to the one who took first place in the Red Run. Effect, update. With each update, the records of all stats increase proportionally to the achievement. Acceleration. Speedrunning is an eternal pursuit race. The throne holder must move the fastest. Overall speed is increased by 10%, and all stats for the current update are increased by 5. Then the MC smiled and said, "After all, goblins are easy to chop, just as cabbage." Then the rest of the party looked at the system windows, and Forehead here shouted, Wow, a heroic rank title? Yubin-kun said, wow, the casting reduction option is so rare. Then they turned to the protagonist, and Forehead here shouted that he was grateful to him. If it weren't for him, they wouldn't have even dreamed of such rewards. Yubin-kun also expressed her gratitude, and the protagonist smiled and replied, "You're welcome." After that, Shield Best approached him and, calling him, awkwardly asked if he wanted to see the name added to the rankings. He should have changed the group name earlier. He really was sorry. The protagonist smiled awkwardly and thought, although reaching first place in the rankings was a temporary privilege, perhaps thanks to this achievement, they would even be invited to one of the 10 great guilds. Even if this place was just a dungeon in the starting town, they had still etched their names in the rankings history. Besides, they had even surpassed Exterminator himself. Shield Best added that he apologized for unwittingly causing him inconvenience. If he wanted monetary compensation or something else, he would do everything in his power. In response, the protagonist said everything was fine. He placed his hand on his chest and added, "It happens to everyone. The rankings automatically include the group leader's name anyway, and he hadn't expected them to take first place." He thought, what difference does it make whose name is there? Does it really matter? The public's attention? That only causes problems and stares. The main thing is the rewards. With that, he smiled and then looked at the stats of the items he'd been given. He thought it was the so-called warrior set, ranked from rare to rare plus. These were the best items you could get at this point. He had gotten things like that, so he couldn't complain. Then he grinned wildly and put his hand to his head. Shield Best asked worriedly, "Are you sure you're okay?" He looked ahead, then smiled and replied, "Yes, everything's fine, so there's no need to apologize so much." Forehead here shouted that he was grateful to him, Kaiser. He would be loyal to him to the grave. Yubin-kun added, "Kaiser is the best." Shield Best thought he was simply on another level. Then the system announced that the dungeon session would end in a moment. A portal opened next to them and Shield Best said, "Forehead here." He looked at him in surprise. He said, to be honest, when he read the laudatory posts about Kaiser, he thought people were exaggerating. But now he understood everything. So this is what he is, the forgotten Kaiser. Then MC turned around and asked, "Are they not going back?" Shield Best shouted, "They have to go." After that, they all went through the portal. Sometime later, in the slums of Arde, they entered an establishment, and Forehead here said, "Oh, it's completely different here during the day?" Yubin-kun spoke, just like magic. "How could everything change so much?" The protagonist looked to the side. Alchemist Kalde was sitting there. He shouted, "Who the hell are they?" Forehead here folded his arms and said, "He's kind of unpleasant." Yubin-kun said, "He looks like a pervert." And Shield Best said, "You can't judge people by their appearance." Then the alchemist asked, he hoped they didn't come to give up. Well, there are plenty of people willing to help, but he needs a lot of blood for his research. Then MC placed a bottle of blood on his desk, and he shouted in surprise, "Isn't that the blood of a mutant goblin? They've already brought it? From the past? And only about 40 minutes ago?" The protagonist answered, "Exactly." He said, "It's incredible to defeat this mutant so quickly." Then the system reported, "Has the maximum affection title effect been activated from the start? Affection levels are growing significantly faster. Affection for Kalde is increasing. The Goblin Blood quest has been completed. The reward is 1 gold piece, experience, and a silver ring crafted by Kalde. His level has increased. He has passed the 0 trial. Rating is not fixed in the 0 trial. Now they can go to the main continent. Reward, a low-ranking skill summon ticket has been received. For reaching level 10, a random skill summon ticket has been received." Forehead here shouted joyfully, "Finally, the main continent." The system reported, "The special condition has been met. The reward has been received." They received a card written in Kalde's hand. A card written in Kalde's hand? Rank rare plus. Description written in Kalde's hand. MC looked at it and thought, a special reward? Well, that could be dealt with later. Something else was important now. The moment he had been waiting for most after Pantheon. The next second, several cards flew up in front of him, and he thought, compared to Pantheon, it didn't look so impressive. The system reported that the Eye of Truth had been activated. He thought, apparently, since it was a low-ranking ticket, there was nothing special about it. The system reported that he had received the skill Dash and Sweep. Dash and Sweep. Rank normal. Restrictions. Class Swordsman. Description: allows you to dash in the chosen direction, simultaneously striking with a sword. Effect: deals damage equal to 105% of attack power. The dash distance depends on the speed of movement. The higher the attack speed, the faster the skill activates. Cooldown: 10 seconds. He thought, dash and sweep, not bad. He'd used this often back in Demrock. However, that wasn't the most important thing now. A ticket that could drop anything, from common to legendary. The system asked if he should use the random skill summon ticket. Session time limit exceeded. Forced log out in 5 seconds. He thought in surprise, what? Session time limit. Systems designed to ensure that players immersed in the incredibly realistic world of Gauze wouldn't forget about time, die of exhaustion, or develop a gambling addiction. He thought in surprise. 10 hours had already passed. The system began counting down the seconds, and the protagonist began to become visibly nervous. He grabbed the system window, and the system announced that the mission timed out. Forced termination. When the session expired, the protagonist woke up in a capsule and screamed loudly. The next day, waiting until 10 a.m., he climbed into the capsule again and was transported to the world of God of Savior. Finding himself in the slums of Arda, the protagonist nervously wondered what he needed to check. Then, sure enough, there was a yellow light. A system window appeared. indicating he had an untested skill. He thought it was a legendary skill, but no. He'd been having too much luck lately. He'd gotten the backdoor ability at heroic rank. Restriction. Assassin class. Description. This ability allows you to get behind an enemy, disorienting them, and dealing increased damage. Effect. Moves behind the target within a certain radius. This marks the target. The skill can be reused until the mark disappears. When used again, the character appears behind the target again and deals a critical strike, dealing damage proportional to the accumulated damage on the target. Cooldown, 50 seconds. MC thought in surprise. A rear-end attack? This is the assassin's signature skill. It's the main reason range damage dealers fear them. No matter how much distance someone has to cover, this insane skill allows them to instantly appear next to them. And now he's got it? If he gets a few more of these, he'll become the perfect damage dealer in both PvP and PvE, blowing everyone away. At that moment, 2 adventurers passed by. The man, seeing his wild look, asked if he was crazy. His girlfriend excitedly suggested they go another way. After that, they quickly ran off. MC looked at them in bewilderment, opened the system window and smiled, thinking that he'd gotten a skill. Now it's time to try on his clothes. With such a good thing, he wouldn't look like a loser anymore. Dressed in new clothes, he smiled and thought it was time to head to the main continent. A system window appeared, informing him that in a moment he would be teleported to Raven, the first city on the main continent. Once teleported to the main continent, it would be impossible to return to Arda. Approaching the portal, the protagonist reflected on how yesterday he had simply left without even saying goodbye. He had gotten used to them, and he felt sorry. Well, if it was fate, they would meet again. After that, he teleported to the main continent. Emerging from the portal in the city, the protagonist reflected on how all the players who had completed their training in Arda, full of bright hopes, were setting foot on the main continent for the first time. Unlike Arda, where servers are divided by country, here, everyone gathers together and forms groups. And the first point on this journey was Raven, the very first city. At that moment, warriors entered the city and shouted that the Knights of Raven had returned from their mission. A system window appeared, notifying him that he had arrived on the main continent. Previously blocked systems are now accessible. Newbie bonuses have been cancelled. The arena, duels, workshops, and other features are now available. Raven is the city where his true adventure begins. Let him enjoy the new horizons of the main continent. Advice: if he becomes the victim of a crime in Raven, report it to a guard immediately. MC paused in surprise. It's true they say the real game begins on the mainland. Suddenly, a beer vendor called out to him and told him to stop by for a taste of their famous ash beer, the pride of Raven. That red outfit suited him perfectly. The other vendors joined in, offering refreshments. The protagonist thought he now understood why people forgot about hunting and simply strolled around town. Okay, he needs to get ready. Fun can wait. Well, time to hunt. After a while, he reached the Raven Plains and began fighting goblins. In his new attire, the protagonist gained the effects of the warrior set. 3 items. Applies the intimidation effect to goblins. Against goblins, it deals 7% additional damage and increases all stats by 2. He smiled and thought that there were no better items against goblins. A system window appeared, notifying that the warrior set's effect inflicts the intimidation status on the enemy. The red goblin was terrified, and the blue goblin's morale was broken. MC used the dash and slash skill and instantly defeated the frightened goblins. A system window appeared, notifying that the warrior set's effect inflicts additional damage. The red goblin was defeated, and so was the blue goblin. The attack power of the red two-handed sword was increased. The protagonist thought, he's really enjoying this. He already had high stats, and now he gets 7% extra damage, not to mention a weapon that can be upgraded in battle. He's so happy. The quests were progressing slowly. Just a little more and he'd level up. Suddenly, he sensed another person's presence. Turning around, the protagonist noticed the person's appearance and thought, this is a warrior set. There's no prey more delicious than a crowd of noobs. The adventurer tried to attack him, but instead struck his enormous sword. The MC, with an incredible aura, asked, what the hell? The guy nervously jumped back and asked, why are they standing there? At that moment, other adventurers appeared and began attacking him with bows. The protagonist began deflecting each arrow with his sword. Suddenly, another adventurer with an axe attacked him, but he deftly parried the attack and counterattacked with lightning speed. The guy, horrified, thought, this can't be happening. He's a noob. He tried to run away, but the protagonist used his skill and, appearing right in front of him, asked with a sly smile, is he lost? He thought that wherever a person is, there will always be those who refuse to obey. And it's no different in games. I'm not talking about official PvP in arenas, but about merciless slaughter. In other words, players who make a living killing other players existed in both Demrock and God of Savior. Whether it was for fun, for profit, or simply to annoy someone, the reasons could be many. But if you asked who was the worst, 9 out of 10 would answer gankers. These are the ones who kill players who have barely left their starting village and fleece them blind. Just like this guy standing in front of him now. The adventurer, horrified, wondered if this was a rear-end attack. How could a swordsman use this skill? Immediately afterward, the protagonist killed him. A system window appeared, notifying him that he had killed 4 players. His actions were considered self-defense. His karma would not increase. He thought that in this regard, everything was the same as in Demrock. However, ARD, with its bonuses for newcomers, was an exception, and even those guys were unusually kind. But the reality was that there were only scumbags around. Well, while he collected the loot and received the quest reward, a system window appeared, notifying him that the goblin extermination quest had been completed. Received 70 silver and experience. The hunter's request quest had been completed. Received 80 silver, experience, and a necklace of wild beast fangs. His level had increased, reaching level 17. The western gate was now accessible. The protagonist smiled as he thought about finally accessing this gate. The western Raven Forest was a dangerous hunting ground, avoided even by NPCs. Unlike the spacious plains near the eastern gate, everything here was overgrown with dense thickets, limiting visibility. It's not just goblins that swarm here, but also hordes of giant insects. There are sudden goblin ambushes and creatures that attack from behind trees and rocks. Because of this, the difficulty of the western forest is prohibitively high, leading to the unspoken rule of this place, a minimum of 3 people in a group. That's why there are always crowds of people in front of the western gate. After some time, many adventurers were looking for a group in front of the western gate of Raven. One of them remarked that all they needed was a healer. Where were they all? Another guy replied that healers are always in short supply. Playing with them is boring, and leveling them up is pure torture. Another teammate called out to him, and, pointing his finger at the main character, said, "Another madman has appeared. There are upstarts like that everywhere." He noted that even top players mostly come here to party. What was he even hoping for? The protagonist, hearing this, merely chuckled. He then entered a dense grove and began slaying forest goblins. One of the monsters attempted to attack him from behind, but MC deftly leaped back and delivered a powerful kick, then finished him off with his sword. Suddenly, another goblin began shooting at him with a bow. He deflected the arrows, then threw his sword with lightning speed and struck the enemy. A system window appeared, notifying him that the warrior set effect had been deactivated. At that moment, another crowd of goblins surrounded him. The protagonist summoned his axe and thought that against such opponents, he didn't even need the set. Another system window appeared, stating that the adventurer effect enabled basic weapon skills. The rear entrance skill was used. He quickly appeared behind the goblin and used the basic downward slash skill. After this, the goblins began attacking him at once, but the protagonist struck down several opponents with a single swing, and then began finishing off the rest, contemplating how well the axe felt in his hand. After some time, he destroyed all the monsters and thought the goblin quest was over. Suddenly, a huge centipede appeared behind him. MC leaped powerfully and delivered a powerful sword strike. After falling, the monster immediately began attacking him. He parried the attack, picked up the axe, and declared that not only was it ugly, but it was also too mouthy. The protagonist swiftly severed several of the monster's fangs, then delivered the finishing blow and destroyed it. System windows appeared, notifying him that he had killed the giant forest centipede. His sword mastery had increased to level 10. His level had increased. He opened the status window and, seeing his stats, thought he had already leveled up too. Although it was challenging, he was leveling up quite quickly. He'd already completed most of the quests, and now there was only one normal plus quest left at the western gate. A system window appeared, stating that the last quest was called The Lost Pendant. Rank, Normal Plus. Description: a request from a girl named Camilla, whose favorite pendant was stolen by a cat. He needs to find the pendant beyond the western gate for her. Reward: 1 gold, experience, and a small gift from Camilla. Risk of failure: Emily's affection may decrease. He thought that the quest wasn't particularly difficult. The location was already known, so all he had to do was go and get it. After a while, a large crowd of adventurers had gathered at the western gate itself. MC looked at the tree and wondered if this pendant would respawn at that very tree. At least the line wasn't that long. If there were more people, he would have had to wait forever. Suddenly, one of the adventurers shouted out if they'd heard that noob killer was being hunted. Another guy asked, "That bastard nicknamed Assassin? Serves him right for bragging." Another adventurer asked, "I heard he was talking about Kaiser?" MC was surprised, wondering why his name had even come up. The guy replied that it was unlikely to be true. He was just some fan. The adventurer exclaimed that people were talking nonsense about a swordsman using assassin skills. That was pure nonsense. He chuckled and asked if anyone would actually believe that. The protagonist thought he'd have to lay low for a while. A swordsman using assassin skills and with 6 stats to boot? Guilds wouldn't let that slide. Some would try to lure him away, of course, but most would just want to get rid of the threat, especially when the top guilds are full of Demrockers. If you can't get it, you destroy it. That's just their style. After some time, the protagonist retrieved the pendant, after which a system window appeared, notifying him that he had received the lost pendant. He should return the pendant to Camille. He thought it was too soon. After some time, the protagonist returned to Raven and gave the item to the girl. She happily thanked him and said that if it weren't for him, she never would have found it. A system window appeared, notifying him that the lost pendant quest had been completed. The reward was 1 gold, experience, and a small gift from Camille. His level had increased. He had reached level 20 and received a pendant for a random him skill. The girl handed him the box and remarked that it was her favorite thing. But he was so kind, so she was giving it to him. She gave him a small gift with a description stating that Camille had a hobby of collecting unusual things. This was her most prized treasure, a random box. No one knew what was inside. MC thanked her and told her not to lose it again. The girl became even happier and thanked him. A system window appeared, stating that the maximum affection from the start title effect had been activated. Affection levels were growing significantly faster. Camille's affection had increased significantly. He began to leave, wondering if it was because she was a child. Affection had grown very quickly, so now it was time for him to take on the next quest. A system window appeared, stating that the new quest was dungeon clearing. Rank, rare. Description. Irina, who had always feared the Western Forest more than anyone else, is worried that leaving the dungeon unguarded for too long will increase the monster's strength. Reward, 10 gold, experience, 1 low skill coupon. Risk of failure, Irina might be disappointed. Time limit, 48 hours. MC thought that since they were even giving a coupon, such a quest was too good to pass up. Regarding the dungeons beyond the Western Gate, there were 2 main ones, the Goblin Chieftain's Dwelling and the Ant Hole. If he wanted to assemble a warrior set, it would be better to go to the Goblins, but the problem was that both of these dungeons required a group. It was still too early for him to show off his unique abilities. After some time, he came to the Goblin Chieftain's Dwelling, where many adventurers were gathered. People were still recruiting various roles, and some were advertising weapon repair and buying junk. MC was surprised to think that even crafters had gathered there. At that moment, one of the adventurers approached another and announced that he was a rogue. He replied with displeasure that they didn't accept bandits, so he should have some conscience. Another guy exclaimed that if they all shared the desire to defeat the Goblin Chieftain, wouldn't they succeed? The adventurer replied no, the main thing was that he wasn't in the group. The other warriors began to invite the female mage to join their party. The protagonist, watching this, thought that everyone was only looking for mages. Well, in God of Savior, everything depends on the boss's stats, so class inequality is the norm. In this dungeon, a mage is king and god. The problem is, even a swordsman is useless here. Suddenly, one of the adventurers called out to him and asked if he wasn't already in the group. Would he like to join them? The protagonist asked if he knew he was a swordsman. The guy agreed and added that they were high levels. They were just here for the quest, so it didn't matter. He wondered if something was wrong. Maybe he should play along? The MC smiled and said that if they didn't mind, he'd be happy to. The adventurer sent him an invitation to join the team. He looked at the nicknames of his new allies and wondered if these people recognized him. A little earlier, one of the adventurers in this party had asked if it was him, right? Kaiser in a warrior set, and with a two-handed sword no less. The girl replied with a smirk that it was definitely him. It was unlikely that there was another one like him in this zone. The team leader, with a sly smile, said that this was a pitiful sight. After some time, they descended into the dungeon and set up a small camp. A system window appeared, stating that this was the abode of the Goblin Chieftain. Rank, rare. Type, common dungeon. Description. This is the abode of the legendary Green Goblin warrior, who was cursed and exiled from the tribe. The player limit was 4, and the level cap was up to level 24. One of the adventurers killed a goblin scout, which was later reported to the chieftain. MC, observing their technique, thought they were quite good. They dealt decent damage, and their teamwork was also excellent. A system window appeared, notifying that the frightened chieftain was sending his soldiers. Let them prepare for battle. Suddenly, a loud cry rang out from the depths of the dungeon. One of the team asked if he wanted to try it himself this time. Another guy smiled and remarked that if things got dangerous, they would immediately intervene. The girls said they would also test their synergy. If anything happened, they would immediately help. The protagonist wondered if they were testing his mettle. Well, he'd play along for a bit. He silently used his dash and slash skill, then began a fierce battle with the goblins. The team leader, with a wry smile, remarked that it was definitely him. So, how's he doing? The other guy replied that he's not bad. He skillfully avoids vital hits, and for a two-hander, he's pretty fast. The adventurer remarked that with such items, he'd hardly lose to anyone in this zone. He replied that something was still odd. How could their assassin lose to such a simple donor? He's not that strong, but he's fast, he admits. But for an assassin with invisibility and poison, one of the best classes for PvP, to lose to him, and 3 against 1 at that? A girl approached them and said, "What difference does it make? What's there to think about? Their goal is just to finish him off." The team leader said it was time for them to finish him off and wash their hands of him. Let them watch their faces. They were still playing by the same old rules. After that, he approached the main character and, with a smile, said that he really was awesome. Another adventurer remarked that they'd joined just in case, but looked like he could handle them all on his own. The protagonist replied with a smile, "No, they're all excellent fighters too." He called out to his ally and asked how he'd managed to find such a pro. The guy replied that it was all just his trained eye. The MC wondered if they'd abandoned their teammate alone in the thick of battle, and were being so brazen after such a dirty trick. They could abandon him at any moment, and if he died, they'd probably take his things. The squad leader said he thought they'd rested enough. Then shouldn't they move on? The whole team supported his decision. He thought he'd find a moment and quietly kill him. After that, they set off and began fighting goblins. At one point, a girl tried to attack the protagonist from behind, but a goblin attacked him, causing the magical attack to land on the monster. The squad leader whispered that she should aim properly. She replied that she was definitely aiming for him, but the goblin suddenly jumped out. Another guy asked if maybe the recoil was high. MC thought he'd even given them his back, and they were still missing. He'd have to wait a little longer. After a while, they arrived at the boss's room. A system window appeared, notifying them that the goblin chieftain had detected intruders. Elite red goblin soldiers were trying to stop the intruders. Huge elite soldiers, holding the title of elite monsters, came straight towards them. The team leader exclaimed, "Let Kaiser hold off these soldiers for now." When he turned to look, he discovered that Kaiser was gone. Another adventurer nervously exclaimed that he'd figured it out. The girl called out to them and warned them of the danger. At that moment, the elite goblin had already struck. The boy blocked the blow at the last moment and shouted that he'd hold him back and that they should attack him faster. The girl was about to use a skill when a huge boulder, dropped by the goblin chieftain, fell from the ceiling near her. A system window appeared, stating the monster's title was Rare Dungeon Boss, and its type was Goblin. Its attributes were Cowardice, Selfish Defense, Vengeance. Its description was a goblin who inherited the blood of the greatest goblin warrior of antiquity. However, this blood had now been severely diluted, making it unable to hide its cowardly nature and even neglecting its weight. The adventurer excitedly exclaimed that they would distract him for now, and in the meantime, he suddenly noticed the protagonist. He approached them with a sly smile and asked, "So, are they friends of that assassin?" The girl, horrified, replied that yes, they were his enemies. That was true, but they needed to clear the dungeon first. They could only get through it together anyway. The protagonist replied that this sounded reasonable. She began to happily agree when he suddenly silently thrust his sword into her and, smiling, said he didn't want to. A system window appeared, notifying him that he had killed a player. This player has villain status, so his karma meter isn't increasing. The MC thought with a smile, yeah, she's definitely one of the villains. He'd try a rear flank attack first. He'd considered it, but he didn't think it would work, even on a corpse. The squad leader, holding back a goblin's onslaught, exclaimed, "He killed a mage. Does he want them all to die here?" The protagonist asked with a smile if he knew what his credo was. He wouldn't deal with those who were aiming for his back. The moment he got involved with such people, everything would inevitably fall apart. Then he pulled out an assassin's dagger. The guy exclaimed in shock, "It's an assassin's dagger. What's he going to do with it?" The MC asked with a smile. He recognized it right away. It belonged to a friend after all, right? The adventurer shouted, "That's nonsense. How can a swordsman use this weapon? No, even if so, what does he expect? If he kills them, does he really think he'll be able to complete this dungeon alone?" The protagonist asked if he knew what the goblin chieftain's selfish defense stat was for. The adventurer replied that it was against physical attacks. That's why mages are the top tier in this dungeon. And he, a worthless wretch, couldn't do anything with just a dagger. The MC asked with a smile what he thought the status effect was. The guy exclaimed in confusion. He was going to kill the boss with a regular weapon, bleed? He replied that if it were regular bleed, it would be possible. The protagonist made a lightning-fast dash and delivered a small blow with the dagger. System windows appeared, notifying him that the difference in stats was overwhelming. The assassin's dagger effect had been activated. The enemy's sense stat was high, bleed was activated. The bleeding status effect was applied. Afterward, both the guy and the goblin fell. Another system window appeared, stating that due to the overwhelming difference in stats, damage was significantly increased. His health dropped below 50%. He, bleeding out, was shocked to think there was such a huge difference. His level was higher. What were they even talking about? No matter how cool his gear, he was level 24 and he was only 20. How huge was the difference to cause such bleeding? MC thought he couldn't understand it. It was the bleeding skill that dropped from the level 20 coupon. He himself was surprised that the effects stacked. In God of Savior, as in the days of Demrock, status effects from the same class usually don't stack. But who could have known that a psychopath like him would appear, using an assassin's weapon with rogue skills? The adventurer, bleeding out, asked, "What kind of nonsense is this?" He was definitely a cheater. After that, he was completely lost. System windows appeared, notifying him that he had killed a player. This player has the villain status, so his karma meter doesn't increase. He also defeated an elite red goblin soldier. The protagonist thought that these guys always make the same excuses. At that moment, the last adventurer, having witnessed the death of two of his friends, began to wonder in horror, how did everything turn out this way? Where exactly did it all go wrong? No, he shouldn't have even gotten involved in this from the very beginning. He needed to run before it was too late. Just as the guy was thinking this, the protagonist had already struck both him and the goblin with lightning speed. He fell, was afflicted with the bleeding status effect, and then died. A system window appeared, notifying him that he had killed a player. This player has the villain status, so his karma meter doesn't increase. He also defeated another elite red goblin soldier. The MC thought that the damage was pretty good. Well, and he put 15 points into strength. It was worth it. Suddenly, the boss started screaming. A system window appeared, notifying him that the goblin chieftain was furious over the death of his subordinates. After that, the monster began to attack mindlessly. The protagonist thought that he had completely forgotten about him. Well, time to have some fun. At the moment the boss attacked, he made a quick dash and delivered a knee to the head. The goblin flew to the side, but then got up covered in the selfish defense effect. The protagonist dashed with lightning speed and struck with a dagger, thereby inflicting the bleeding effect on the boss. The goblin immediately began to bleed. He noted with a smile that it was time to finish. Sensing an incredibly powerful aura, the boss began to run away in horror. MC used the rear entry skill and, appearing right in front of him, asked with a smile, "Where is he going?" After that, he dealt the final blow and destroyed the boss. A system window appeared, notifying him that he had defeated the dungeon boss, the goblin chieftain. The dungeon was cleared, and an entry was added to the adventure book. His level had increased, and his dagger mastery had reached level 5. He also received an item, a durable leather belt. Rank rare, level limit 20. This is a leather belt worn by the goblin chieftain. This item is made so durable that it could withstand his enormous weight. MC happily thought that this was a great reward. He needed a belt, so everything worked out well. He put the belt on, after which, system windows appeared, notifying that his strength had increased by 1 and his health by 2. The protagonist thought that this was not bad. If there had been a time limit, he would have made it into the rankings. Oh well. Not all dungeons have a time limit. He was sorry, of course, but there was still time left, some reward. He collected items from dead adventurers, namely a silver iron shield and the bastard's training sword. The protagonist, picking up the sword, reflected on how much of an avid role player he was. Well, his nickname was worthless now. He also picked up the necklace and remarked that he could simply sell it. Suddenly, his Eye of Truth skill automatically activated. MC looked deeper into the dungeon and saw a glow, and then wondered in confusion. What was that? Could it be stealth? But the light was too bright for that. Maybe there was some kind of grass there? A system window appeared, notifying him that he had discovered a secret dungeon, the Black Goblin Shaman's Refuge. He was the first to discover the secret dungeon, so he earned the title of Skilled Explorer. The protagonist approached the portal and was surprised to think that there were many types of dungeons, from group dungeons to solo bosses and labyrinths, as well as special ones, and event dungeons. But among all of these, the rarest and most obscure are the secret dungeons. Even players with the explorer profession are finding it difficult, as these dungeons are not only located in unimaginable places, but also require special conditions to enter. A system window appeared stating that the presence of one survivor in the dungeon has been confirmed, as well as the absence of a group. All conditions are met. The protagonist thought that these conditions were simply insane. In a group dungeon, he needs to find a secret entrance alone. Without a group, with such conditions, even finding the dungeon would be useless. A system window appeared stating that this dungeon is a Black Goblin Shaman's Refuge. Rank, Hero. Type, Secret Dungeon. Stat, Solo Boss. Description. Rumors once circulated in Raven about someone seeing a goblin with black skin, which gave rise to many superstitions. Player limit, 1 entry requirements. Discoverer, upon successful completion, the dungeon disappears. In case of failure, re-entry is impossible. The MC wondered if the dungeon was heroic ranked. He had to complete it. He entered the dungeon and reflected on how freed. A player ranked 1279th in the God of Savior rankings once said that entering a secret dungeon was like sticking your head in a beast's mouth. The protagonist reflected that while this expression was ambiguous, all players who had been in secret dungeons agreed with Freed's opinion. What would happen if you stuck your head in a beast's mouth? The mouth would slam shut. The secret dungeon was that very mouth, wide open, awaiting its prey. When he entered the portal, a system window appeared notifying him that he had entered a dungeon. Taking a direct hit would cause him to be affected by the shadow vision effect. While under the effect of shadow vision, his field of vision narrows for a certain period. The hero stat blocks mental pollution. The shadow vision effect is ignored. The MC, with a sly smile, said it was a warm welcome. Black Shaman Jihad, the boss sitting on the throne opposite him, asked how he dared enter his home without permission. Had he completely lost his fear? There were so many monsters around him, from black goblins to undead spiders. The boss said with a smile. It seemed like he was frozen with horror when he saw his children. A system window appeared, stating that this was the boss Jihad. Title, named boss of heroic rank, type goblin. Stats, genetic factor, cursor, necromancer, sleight of hand. Description, a survivor of a fallen clan. Jihad, heir to great blood, a goblin who has lived for hundreds of years. The MC wondered in surprise, is this a named boss? Even the secret missions may be incredibly challenging, but a named boss. When he defeated the dragon, the reward had been impressive. What would happen this time? The boss remarked. What's strange? How did the man find this place? He didn't sense any explorer's energy within him. So many different forces were mixed within him. What a curious creature he was. The protagonist was surprised to learn that he was quite perceptive for a goblin. Jihad had said he was an unusual specimen. But once he'd set foot here, there was no escape. He then directed his subordinates to attack. The protagonist asked with a smile, isn't he even tense? Then he'd remind him, when fighting a melee, a ranged opponent must always be on guard. He used the attack on the rear skill and instantly appeared behind the enemy. The boss excitedly began using the corpse control skill to drive him away. Releasing one spirit, he used the corpse explosion ability, creating a magical explosion. To the goblin's surprise, the protagonist instantly shifted position and stabbed him with his dagger, triggering the bleeding status effect. Jihad, shocked, exclaimed, When did he do it in time? MC asked with a smile if he was surprised. He told him he needed to be on guard. The goblin furiously began attacking him with corpses and exclaimed that they would see how long he could last. He began deftly dodging each attack and wondered what he was seeing, where he was aiming, where he was going to strike, and what he was planning. After an unsuccessful attack, Jihad used the ultimate necromant technique, Great Corpse Explosion, which created a powerful explosion. Afterward, he smiled and said that since he had regained flesh, it was time to stretch. He had hastened his own death. The protagonist approached him with lightning speed and, striking him with his fist, asked if he had a skill in cooldown. The boss flew into the wall and exclaimed that he would definitely get revenge. He then began to land a series of punches. After such a beating, Jihad called out to him and said, "He just broke his bones. You can't hit bones. It's not fair." MC was perplexed, thinking, is the boss serious? Great Corpse Explosion was quite powerful, but even so, he was too weak. Seizing the opportunity, the boss jumped away from him and said, "I was just waiting for him to relax." A system window appeared, stating that the secret dungeon boss was activating the genetic factor stat. When Jihad finished activating the skill, his rank would increase. MC thought that even if the enemy seemed pathetic to him, if he went from hero to hero plus, things would get serious. After all, raids against hero plus bosses required a full team, and he couldn't let that happen. He grabbed his sword and charged with lightning speed. The protagonist increased his strength by 20 points and wondered if he'd gone too far in strength. But in this world, everyone is equal before the sword. System windows appeared, notifying him that thanks to the rage effect, he deals 10% more damage to the boss. Sword mastery increases damage by 10%. MC dashed with lightning speed and delivered a powerful blow, killing the boss. A system window appeared, notifying him that the boss of the secret dungeon had been defeated. The secret dungeon had been cleared, and this was recorded in the adventure book. He was the first to clear the secret dungeon, so the reward increased. His level increased, and he received a reward for clearing the dungeon. The Black Goblin Shaman's Orb of Restless Souls is a universal orb containing the souls of a Black Goblin Shaman. Rank, Hero. Required level 30. Class restrictions, Necromancer, Shaman, Mage. Black Goblin Shaman's Robe. A black robe worn by a Black Goblin Shaman. This item has a shape-shifting spell, allowing one to easily conceal one's identity. Rank, Hero. Required level 30, no restrictions. Special effect, putting on the hood activates shapeshifting mode. MC happily said that, as expected from the heroic rank, the rewards are simply insane. He didn't expect to receive both an orb and equipment. The effects are a bit unique, but they certainly won't be unnecessary. He also discovered that he had received the trace of a forgotten clan item of unknown rank. The protagonist noted that unidentified items in Demrock looked similar. Well, he'll figure that out someday. He also received an unidentified card. He was surprised to learn that God of Savior placed a special emphasis on cards. Not just skill sets and enchantments, even bosses added to the adventure book. They were all saved as cards. The protagonist said that since it was a monster card, it must be for enchantments or something similar. He opened the card and got a Jihad card, rank Hero. Description: this is a card that contains the soul of a Black Goblin Shaman. MC was shocked, wondering if he'd gotten a guardian. As the name suggests, it's a creature that protects its master's will. A fire mage's salamander or an alchemist's golem are typical examples of guardians. He said that wasn't bad, of course, but unless it was a divine beast like the dragon or tiger that old man was carrying around, guardians usually just gobble up money and don't do any good. MC summoned the guardian, and a small, level 1 Jihad appeared next to him. Upon seeing him, the goblin exclaimed in horror, "Why is he here?" He wondered in disbelief. What is this misunderstanding? His guard? They usually have a cool appearance and incredible strength, but he got a goblin who does nothing but whine about his fate. What kind of stats does he even have? Cowardice before the strong. An opportunist? A system window appeared, notifying him that the guard's loyalty was critically low. Because of the Jihad stat with low loyalty, he could stab you in the back. MC thought this was bullying. Judging by his behavior, he couldn't let this go. He started approaching him, and the goblin fearfully asked, "What does this man want?" He nervously exclaimed, "What is he calling his master a man? His attitude is completely unacceptable. He's getting hit every second. It's time to start the process of discipline." After this, the protagonist began beating his guard, which caused his loyalty to increase. Sometime later, already in the real world, he emerged from the capsule, went to the kitchen, and asked if there was anything to eat. His sister replied that she hadn't left him anything. MC nervously thought he'd never seen her again. He sat down on the couch next to her and asked where her mother was. The girl replied that she was at a meeting. The protagonist asked what she was watching. The sister replied that she was watching God of Savior. He exclaimed in surprise, "She plays that too." She remarked that everyone was playing it these days. She was already level 71. The protagonist was very surprised and asked if she had been playing for that long since she was that level. The sister replied that she had been playing for about 6 months. Her friend had promised to help her level up, so she joined and gotten hooked. He asked in surprise if it really took that long to level up to 70. The girl replied that she didn't play for 10 hours like some people. At that moment, news about the Heroes Guild started on TV. The sister remarked that they were the most popular guild among young people. They were almost as popular as Exterminator. The MC asked why that was. They weren't even in the top 10. She explained that it was because they were pretty. Guys might like Exterminator, but girls are mostly obsessed with heroes. He looked at the face of the player on TV and remarked that he was too cute. His sister replied, "Let him look at his face. He's the epitome of beauty. He's nowhere near that level." MC thought she looked like a pelican herself. He got up from the couch and said he'd go practice. His sister remarked that with his looks, it's no wonder he's popular on video hosting sites. Guilds all have their own channels these days. Their videos often get 100 million views. The main character exclaimed in shock, "Millions? With 100 million? They're raking in the cash." The girl, perplexed, agreed and added, "They say they make 1 billion. He wondered, "How many servings of chicken can you buy?" The sister looked at his expression in shock and asked, "What's wrong?" The protagonist merely repeated the number of coins and then left the room. After a while, he re-entered the game and said he'd record a little at first. If he filmed, it might come in handy someday. At that moment, a goblin approached him and asked if he'd arrived yet. The MC wondered if he wasn't being too bold. Jihad exclaimed in horror, "No way!" He replied, "Fine, let him call him whatever he likes, and let him put on the robe. He can't wear it yet anyway, and it wouldn't hurt to have something to wear." A system window appeared, notifying him that his loyalty had decreased by 2. The goblin, with a sly smile, said that since the owner had given him clothes, he was now free. The protagonist furiously asked, "What did he just say?" The goblin thanked him fearfully and replied that everything was fine. A system window appeared, notifying him that his loyalty had increased by 2. He thought it was as if this loyalty was tied to an elastic band. Jihad put on his robe and asked where they were going now. MC replied with a smile that they were going to level up. After some time, they arrived in the forest and began killing monsters, goblins and spiders. The goblin, looking at the corpses of his kin, thought how unfortunate they were. How could they have fallen into the clutches of this demon? The protagonist called him over and instructed him to put the dislodged items aside and then turn the corpses into undead. Jihad agreed and began to carry out his orders. A system window appeared, stating that the Guardian had successfully transformed the Forest Red Goblin into undead. After doing this with 3 corpses, he reported that everything was ready. He could actually create an entire army, but that was his limit right now. MC was surprised to think that this would be very useful in the future. Suddenly, Jihad began to control the undead, after which the goblins immediately headed in the opposite direction. Confused, he asked where they were going. The Guardian replied that he'd ordered them to collect items. The protagonist thought he'd already harnessed them to the dirty work. He sat down on a felled tree and remarked that, whatever the case, when he raised 2 more levels, he'd really like to run into an elite mob. Jihad said that if he was talking about elites, he knew where they were. Those slackers always sat in the same place. The protagonist, with a sly smile, asked, "So they were all gathered there, right?"